My kid's in high school, okay? My son's in high school, and I have that conversation with him all the time. Senior in high school. You play to the scoreboard. The scoreboard tells you what your at-bat needs to be. I need to get on base. I need to try to drive the guy in. I need to get the guy from second to third with no outs, get him to third with one out so the guy behind me can drive him in, right? But with the analytics, and again, I believe in analytics. I do. I don't want people to think I don't believe in analytics. But what I'm saying is there's a time and a place to where, you know what? Paul Konerko is one of the best hitters I ever played with. And he had at-bats where he totally gave himself up. Guy on second, no outs, late in the game. And you could see it. He just hit a weak ground ball to second. The guy run to third. Next guy drove him in. We win the game by a run. He would do it, right? But he also hit 400-plus homers and was one of the best hitters I ever seen. But there's a time and a place. We had this conversation earlier, Evan. Joey Votto and Juan Soto, we're talking about how many walks they have, right? There's a time for those guys. There's a runner on third and one out. I want Juan Soto's bat-to-ball skills to put the bat on the ball and drive the guy in, right? Instead of being like, oh, it's a half inch outside. I can't swing at that because I won't walk, but I'll make an out because I hit a ground ball to second and drive the run in. To me, there has to be a combination of the analytics and the hitting, and that's why I'm for the shift of former players coming in and explaining this.
And I don't want to cut Evan off, but I want to add on to that point, AJ, because you're absolutely right. And what's happened is when we say analytics, guys like myself, guys like AJ, analytics is only information. For all the people out there who hear the words analytics and they think it's like some intricate being or thing, it's just information. And what AJ is saying is you can have your hands here or your hands there, or your foot here, or your foot there. But at the end of the day, you have to have a plan. The way you set up isn't going to get you a hit if you don't have a great plan, if you don't know what you do well, if you can't move the ball, right? What I love about what AJ said is me and AJ, we are both in hard places now, raising young men who love the game, and we get caught up in a hard place where we want to teach them, you learn how to hit, you'll slug later, right? Become a good hitter first, where now it's backwards. It's slug, 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 slug. So you have this generation, and even now this window of younger guys, even guys in the game, that they got told it was okay to swing and miss. And it's good until your team starts losing, until you can't manufacture runs, until you don't know. Then all of a sudden it's a problem. So, for me, I think this move to bring Boone in was, like you said, Evan, let's go get some guy who's done it, who has experience, who can maybe give us a better approach because, hey, I can guarantee you they didn't win that World Series solely off of analytic information. It was guys going out there competing, having a team approach. I'm going to be a bastard in the box. I'm going to do whatever I can to have a long quality at bat, to try to get into the bullpen, to try to make this really tough throughout a series. And those are the things that are being lost in the game. You know what I mean? So I love what both of you guys are saying, and that's why I continue to say I love what the Rangers are doing, and I love guys like Chris Young, the Buster Posies, who are now getting these opportunities, who have been in these moments in these players' shoes and really knows that it's bigger than just bat speed and launch angle and all this other crap. That doesn't win you baseball games. So I love what they're doing.
And Cameron, I got to agree with both you guys on this. And the way it was has been best explained to me is look at the greater environment now, right? Look at YouTube or look at social media, and how many guys are out there touting swing. And it's all about individual swings. It's about getting off your best swing. Yeah, that's great. But what I've seen from the Rangers, really going back almost a decade now, is I've seen guys' swings be very much on one plane, and they can't adjust the way it feels to me. And I don't want to make myself sound like, old crotchety guy, but it feels like players' swings have not been quite as adjustable or flexible to the moment as they once were. And I think that's the kind of thing we're talking about here is analytics and metrics and process stats. They are all important tools, but you also have to be self-aware. And there is not as much attention spent on self-awareness and discipline, as that's not considered a tool as raw power is considered a tool.
Evan, let me ask you this, and Cam, can we bring in Cam again on this too? Because I know Cam coaches young kids and he has a team. Here's my thing, Cam. I have a senior in high school. We have kids on our team that could be drafted, possibly signed. We have scouts at every single game, and I know some of them, and I talk to some of them. the number one thing that a lot of the scouts want to see out of high school hitters is what you just said, Evan, adjustability. Like not a one plane swing, right? The guys who get drafted high can use their hands and make an adjustment to where, like, oh, I'm a little bit fooled. Oh, I can flip the ball here, or I can foul it off and live to fight another pitch. So to me, what you're talking about is one of the most important things.
Is that what they want to see, though? I mean, my question, the things that I keep hearing about, in scouting reports that I read are all about raw tools, his hit tool or his raw power tool. And I do think that it is important that guys get a better grasp of both discipline, approach at the plate, and situational awareness.
Agreed. You got to be able to do all of it.
Absolutely.
But the guys, I know this. The guys, listen, you can have raw power, but you can be pitched to, right? But if you have adjustability, if you have both, then you're a stud, right? But if you have adjustability, you can get hits. You can figure out a way to get hits, right? But if you're a one-plane guy, you're so pitchable. You can go on BP and hit 1,000,000 home runs because the BP pitcher's like, here it is, 50 miles an hour, right down the middle, whack, 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 right? But then in the game, they don't throw like that. So you have to be able to use your hands.
Yep.
So anyways.
It is complicated enough to figure out what type of car you want, but when it comes to pricing and best time to buy and all of that information that you're looking for, Car Gurus is the only destination that you should be thinking about, Kratz. Why?
Because I don't have to question what the price is. It's going to be there. If the price changes and comes down to where I want it to be, bang, I get a notification. Car Gurus is giving it to me straight, and this is how I want to purchase a car. Not fast. I just want to know what's going on.
With over 4 million listings, Car Gurus has more car listings than any other major online automotive marketplace in the U.S. So you can find the best deal, and it's no wonder SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows Car Gurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site. So you can buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com. Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's cargurus.com, cargurus.com.
How shocked were you when you saw that he was going to be the guy to try and lead the offense back here?
Yeah, when they decided they were going to change off of Donnie Ecker, the first thing I started looking for was obviously major league hitting coaches with experience who had big league playing experience, because I thought one thing that the Rangers were going to want was an experienced big league voice in the clubhouse. And I looked up some guys that had connections with either Bruce Bochy or Chris Young, and there's a lot of them. But Bret Boone didn't cross my mind just because Bret has never coached. That said, when you look at all the boxes that I think the Rangers wanted to check here, an experienced major league player, a guy who brings a little bit of an edge, a guy who does have some kind of connection to Bochy and to Chris, Bret checks all of those. And he happened to have a really happenstance kind of meeting at a UCLA baseball game with Michael Young over the weekend, and they were just talking baseball and weren't doing a job interview or anything like that. But Bret said, "Hey, make sure that Boch and CY know that I'm thinking about them, and that good luck to you guys the rest of the way." Michael gave the greetings, and it certainly got Chris Young's mind moving. And next thing you know, 24 hours later, they've got Bret Boone on staff.
Hey, I want to talk about you go back to the World Series, and I'm looking at the roster. Adolis Garcia, Evan Carter was a huge spark. Robbie Grossman had a little bit of edge, veteran guy. Austin Hedges, we know what type of clubhouse guy he is. Nathaniel Lowe. The last couple of years, you could talk about injuries, you can talk about lack of this and that. But when I watch even right now, I see a lack of fire. And I when I watch this team, it's like, we know Corey Seager is a naturally laid back guy. Marcus Semien kind of similar as well. You probably gonna have a little bit of the language barrier when you talk about Adolis. Like, I just wonder, sometimes it isn't the performance, but who's the guy? Who's the heartbeat? Like, what, have they lost that fire in your eyes?
Hey, Cam, I think you raise a great point, right? I think when a team is winning and scoring runs and they're all business like the Rangers were in 2023, that's the compliment. Hey, this team is all business. Doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. When you're not scoring runs, and you don't see that kind of emotional flair, it does raise that question. Do they lack fire? Do they lack edge? And I do think internally the Rangers thought that this is a team, not that it's a dull team in any way, not that it's not dedicated or that it doesn't try hard, but I do think that they felt like there was a little bit of edge missing in the clubhouse. Some of that was because some of the younger players that have that ability to bring edge don't have a ton of experience yet. Some of that is because guys who do have the ability to bring the edge on the field, like Garcia, are struggling. And so I think in Bret Boone, they get a guy. Look, we all know who Bret Boone is. And I think one thing that Bret said yesterday in his introduction to the team, that, look, I'm in listen mode right now, which is not my forte. Bret's a cocky guy. He has a lot of opinions. He's got opinions that he shared on his podcast. But I think it's really important for him to come in, be willing to listen to these guys, talk baseball with them. I think he and Jock Peterson immediately bonded. And I think that element of it really helps inside the clubhouse. And eventually, I think Bret's going to be the guy, if somebody needs to challenge a hitter, I think Bret's going to be more than willing to do that when need be. But right now, it's important to gain these guys' trust. You get immediate cachet with your experience, but you've also got to get the trust that these guys feel like, okay, this new guy, we don't know him very well, but we trust him.
All right, Evan, I'll ask this. How many of these guys know who Bret Boone is?
It's a good question, AJ. Because I'm not in Boston, so I didn't ask these guys if they knew who Bret Boone was.
That's a great question. That's a great point, Evan. That's why you got to get there. Boots on the ground,
look,
Evan.
I mean, I'll be in Detroit, AJ. I'm a warrior, man. I'll be in Detroit. I think these guys know who Bret is. Obviously none of them played against Bret Boone, but they know what his reputation was, and some of them have listened to the podcast. And you walk in and you're a 3-time All-Star, a 2-time Silver Slugger, a 2-time top 10 finisher in MVP voting. And people will look at your baseball reference page. They'll look it up. They'll know who Bret Boone is if they didn't know who he was.
Okay, that's fair. Now, let me ask you this question. Is this a switch? Is this a shift in thinking from teams? We've seen it, Chris Young, Craig Breslow, Buster Posey, players getting more active roles. Remember, because for the last about 7, 8, 9 years, we've gone away from players and we're like, oh, analytics. And now it's kind of shifting a little bit back to where, hey, we not only do we need the analytics, but we need somebody that actually stood in the box or on the mound and can relate the analytics to players, because I can get a guy that graduated college to give me numbers, but they can't tell me how to use them as a player. And if I'm a player, I'm going, man, I really need somebody that can translate this for me.
Yeah, and I think I'm really going to regret my saying this, AJ, but you pretty much nailed it there. I think that you've got to have a balance. The analytics are more advanced than ever before. The art of hitting is more difficult than it has ever been before. Pitchers control all the action, and with pitch design and more spin and more velocity, they've got a bigger edge than they've ever had. And so the best thing that a hitter can do going to the plate is have as few thoughts as possible. And I do think that sometimes with analytics, and this is not to say, this is not a criticism of Donnie Ecker individually or anybody on the Rangers staff, but I do think that sometimes, when you've got such a heavy approach on analytics, some of the other things get a little bit either overlooked, or you put too many thoughts in your guy's head going to the plate. And I think that with Bret coming in here, you've got two guys. They've kept the majority of the hitting staff together. Justin Veely, who is a big biomechanics guy and a big analytics guy, and Seth Connor, who is similar. They've kept the staff together pretty much, but I think they felt like they needed a little bit of a countermeasure of a guy who had big league experience, who has lived through those situations, and who could speak kind of at a level that hitters need to understand in game. Let me just say this about the Rangers, right? You look at the top of the organization, Chris Young, 14 years in the big leagues as a pitcher. He lived everything that a pitcher could do. He's a very smart guy. He's an Ivy League graduate. He is big into analytics, but he's also lived the life of a pro baseball player. You look at Mike Maddox, who heads up the pitching staff, and you've got a guy in Dave Bush that's very big on pitch design and who also pitched in the big leagues. And you've got a guy in Jordan Teagues who worked with their young pitchers. and there's a good mesh of different philosophies there. And I think sometimes in this game, we tend to go too hard to one direction, and then of course the pendulum swings back the other way. And I think what we're seeing with the Rangers move is that they feel like they've got really good information, but they also need some real life experience and a little bit more edge. And if you're going to ask players to have edge, who better to do it than somebody who has actually been in the big leagues and played with an edge?
So you mentioned something, though, about the hitting side and Bret Boone and how it's kind of switched over. Here's my question, and I ask people this all the time. What's more important? When you get to the major leagues, you usually have pretty good mechanics with your swing, right? And I think Cam would agree with me on this. Is it more important to have a guy talk to you about approach, meaning this guy throws these pitches, how are we going to combat it? Or is it better to have a guy that can tell you where to hold your hands? Because to me, like, I could figure this stuff out, where to go with my hands. I needed a guy that we could talk about approach and, hey, this is the pitch I need to look for, and this is how I can hit this pitch with my swing. To me, that was a more important factor. I think Cam would agree, but I don't know.
Absolutely.
Here's the one thing I would say to both you guys on that, and that is, look, and I don't want to make anybody feel like they're old, but you look at this generation of players, and they have spent so much time with individual hitting coaches and gurus, and that they look to those guys often for answers on everything. So I do think that it's become kind of a necessary part of the game, in that that's the way that a younger player now kind of communicates. But I also think what's gotten negated is, and look, Bret's a great example of this. Who was Bret's mentor as a hitter in a lot of ways? Edgar Martinez. Edgar was a great hitter. And Edgar was also an unselfish hitter who knew if a runner needed to be moved, he was going to move a runner. It didn't mean he was going to give himself up, but he was going to do what he needed to do in that at bat to make sure that a runner at least moved, that he was going to optimize the ability to keep the run scoring opportunity in place. And I think that's something that the Rangers have not done very well the last 2 years, is that they have spent a lot of time trying to build a slugging team. And look, Bruce Bochy and Chris Young talked about slugging day in and day out in spring training. And I think the real world application is sometimes you're going to have to, when your sluggers go in a slump, if they're not really disciplined hitters at the plate, you're going to have to find other ways to score runs. And when the game asks you, Ron Washington used to say this all the time. He probably said it to you, AJ. You know, when the game asks you to do something, you do it. And I think that's a big part of what the Rangers hope Bret Boone's messaging can get across to these players.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.